Watchers call. Whispers from the eternal void.
Inside the chapel, our lumen arrays registered -3 lux. Our blessed candles produced hoarfrost instead of flame. I am Lex Mechanic Exorcist Iosec Vale, and this Voxlog may be the final coherent transmission from sub-hive Ocelum's sealed sectors. The impossibility before us defies not merely imperial doctrine, but the fundamental laws governing light itself. My augmetic ocular arrays, blessed by Tech Dominus Car and consecrated with the 17 litanies of illumination, read negative photon density with mechanical precision. 27 hours ago, Survey Cohort Gamma 7 descended into this newly exposed Ministorum chapel, discovered when subsidence cracked Ocelum's lower hab blocks like rotten fruit. The tremor barely registered on seismic cogitators. Yet it peeled back 3 centuries of accumulated filth to reveal architecture predating the hive's founding. 12 souls entered. 8 Astra Militarum sappers, 2 tech adepts, 1 sanctioned psyker, and Sergeant Koros, veteran of Macarius's crusades, whose augmetic spine bore 17 commendation studs. Their final transmission, entering primary nave, Emperor protects. Signal optimal, then silence. Not vox failure, but the deeper silence of voices that have ceased existing. The anomaly spreads measurably, 27 meters hourly along ancient sewer conduits, moving through solid rockcrete as easily as empty air. It leaves corridors where shadows fall upward, and moisture crystallizes into geometric patterns that pain the eye. The sump tide will flood our access shaft in 93 minutes. Time constricts like a ligature. My companions represent the Emperor's finest instruments. Tempestus, Scions Korath, and Dex, void warfare veterans whose carapace armor bears scars from 17 Enos encounters. Their hotshot lasguns hum with machine-blessed charge, movements carrying fluid precision of warriors who have faced impossibility and endured. Canoness Seraphia of the Order of the Bloody Rose accompanies us. Her consecrated flamer, blessed with promethium that has burned in St. Drusus's cathedral for 3 centuries. Her power armor bears battle honors from 12 purge campaigns. When she speaks the Emperor's name, my augmetics register measurable decreases in local warp flux. Skitari Ranger Zeta 9 provides reconnaissance, his galvanic rifle loaded with blessed ammunition, omnispecs arrays interfacing directly with machine spirits. Binary Cant whispers constant prayers to the Omnisire from his Vox grill. Vox Adept Thais maintains surface communications through encrypted channels and emergency beacons. She has guided Imperial forces through darkness across 7 war zones, her voice a lifeline in digital hells. We stand before the chapel's entrance, wrongness assaulting every sense. The blast door is ancient adamantium inscribed with high Gothic prayers and Mechanicus blessing runes. Yet the metal drinks light rather than reflecting it, creating shadows, extending in directions geometry should not permit. Above the entrance, raised steel letters spell LUXNONINTRAT. Light does not enter, not warning, fundamental law. Our blessed lumen strips emit ash coal blue radiance instead of warm white. The illumination feels thin, inadequate, as if darkness here possesses physical mass capable of crushing photons before formation. When we speak, words echo back before we finish speaking them. Sound returning from surfaces that should not exist, traveling unmeasurable distances. Every 27 seconds, a bell tolls. Not bronze chapel voice, but something thinner, distant, as if sound travels from far below, rising through stone and accumulated centuries of darkness. Our Auspex arrays detect no source. The sound simply exists, marking time with mechanical precision. I knelt, activated my auger, watching wireframe chapel interior unfold in my eye. The nave mapped as triangular geometry that added wrong angles inclining toward each other, eager to kiss. Software stuttered, spat static and contrition. I whispered the 9 and 9 acknowledgements. The machine looked ashamed of failure. Korath Dex, stack formation, Seraphia commanded, voice blade steady. We proceed on the Emperor's time. Zeta 9 planted breeching clamps with reverence he reserved only for sacred machinery. Korath secured tethers without orders. Thais recited saints whose skulls had been fashioned into hinges, stopping at a name I did not recognize. The bell tolled. 27 seconds stretched like narrow throat. Then nothing. Then world returned. I placed my palm against adamant, began the old accord. Binharik chitter lapped at heavy metal, like tidewater seeking purchase. It remembers my kind, I reported. Wants none of me. Then let it want, Seraphia said, nodding to Zeta 9. Clamps bit like teeth. Hydraulics groaned. Rust powdered down in dry snow that did not quite touch us. Iron and candle wax rose. Smell of altars, untouched by palms for centuries. My mouth filled with ashes, augmetics with cold. The door shuddered, considered what it could deny, began cycling. Lumen strips flickered blue ice light, licked our boots, fled. Heat ran backward. Frost bloomed across Seraphia's flamer pilot hood, evaporated. The door opened wider. Darkness beyond possessed depth like a well, auspex returning distance readings that failed to terminate. Hydraulics screamed as rust flayed from bone. The door fought itself, failed itself, cycled wider. Bell did not toll this time. 27 seconds stretched until they felt like ligature. Theis's vox spiked. She flinched, hunched shoulders, and we heard it spill into air through external speakers. Woman's prayer in archaic Gothic, rising and falling in perfect 27-second loop. Syllables cut clean, cadence unbroken, devotion perfect as chain. The chapel waited in darkness, and something ancient had begun to sing. We crossed the threshold in arrowhead formation. Seraphia at point. Scions flanking. Myself and Zeta, 9 trailing with Thais, secured center. Standard breach protocol for unknown hostile architecture. What we discovered violated every tactical doctrine blessed by the Departamento Munitorum. The darkness possessed physical mass. My boot sank 3 millimeters into what should have been ancient stone, finding instead cold substance with oil's consistency but vacuum's temperature. Each step required deliberate effort, as if we waded through liquid shadow that clung to ceramite and blessed steel. No dust motes danced in our lumen beams. No insects scattered from disturbance. The air held no particulate matter. Darkness here consumed everything smaller than prayer. Temperature plummeted 18 degrees within 20 seconds. Our breath crystallized instantly. Condensation becoming rime that accumulated on rebreather grills in geometric patterns. Hexagons within hexagons. Fractals that pained direct observation. The cold possessed intelligence, selecting specific surfaces to spell scripture in languages predating Imperial Gothic. I activated augmetic enhancement, flooding retinal arrays with blessed machine sight. The chapel revealed itself in wireframe overlay, and my cogitators immediately began screaming error litanies. Triangular sections summed to angles exceeding 180 degrees. Support pillars curved impossibly, bearing loads that should collapse any structure not blessed by the Omnissiah's direct intervention. Corners leaned inward with architectural hunger. Servo skull reconnaissance, I commanded, deploying the probe with whispered binary benedictions. Its red sensor eye cut through darkness like accusation before vanishing beyond our lumen reach. 3 heartbeats passed. We counted seconds by Thes's labored breathing. The skull returned bearing gifts. It deposited a human mandible in my palm, enamel crazed, sutures clean, roots polished as if tongued by centuries. Along the inner curve, microscopic etching glinted. Eye magnified, letters cut with tool finer than needles, each stroke prayer steady. 0 is a prayer answered. Souls leave messages where blood cannot, Seraphia observed, voice blade steady despite circumstances. Behind us the blast door slammed shut. Hydraulic pistons locked with finality of clenched fists, yet diagnostics showed no motive power, no electrical current, no pneumatic pressure. The door had simply decided to close, metal obeying will rather than engineering. Theis's Vox unit degraded to 27% fidelity. The woman's prayer now looped backward through speakers, sacred syllables tumbling in reverse cascade that made my augmetics ache with harmonic dissonance. Prometheum system check, Seraphia ordered, raising her flamer with ritual reverence. The pilot light should have birthed tame blue flame. Instead, for 1 heartbeat's duration, negative fire appeared. Blackness, licking inward, drinking heat. Frost raced along blessed steel before orange flame resumed, stuttering uncertainly. My tactical slate redrew the chapel interior in real time, mapping nave, transept, chancel in jittering phosphor lines. The altar registered 60 meters distant through geometric impossibility. Range runes held steady. Yet when Seraphia extended her gauntleted hand, Ceramite touched cold stone immediately. Distance had become negotiable here. Litany of true sight, I began, voice echoing strangely. Words returned from surfaces that should not exist, traveling unmeasurable distances through folded space. We advanced through liquid darkness, each step pulling free with viscous resistance. The nave stretched impossibly, pews carved from single bones, ribs of creatures that had never walked Terra's surface, vertebrae fused into prayer seats facing an altar that drew closer and farther simultaneously. Zeta 9's omnispecs arrays detected no life signs, yet registered movement in peripheral sensors. Shadows shifting without light source. Air currents flowing in patterns suggesting massive respiration. Something vast slumbered here, breathing through stone and accumulated centuries. Contact front, Korath reported. Hotshot lasergun tracking threats that existed and didn't exist. Negative contact, Dex contradicted. Sensors reading empty space. Both were correct. Both were wrong. The altar moved without moving. Distance collapsed without changing. And we advanced through space that remembered different rules than the ones governing Imperial reality. Temperature continued dropping, -15 degrees and falling. Rime accumulated on weapon barrels, forming scripture that praised saints I did not recognize. Someone was writing on our equipment, using cold as stylus. My wireframe overlay flickered, chapel geometry shifting as we observed. Corners leaned closer, pillars curved inward. The altar approached while remaining distant, space folding according to architectural hunger that predated human understanding. The woman's prayer reversed completely, then began forward again, syllables sharp as broken glass. Thighs monitored degrading Vox channels, surface communications dissolving into static, punctuated by bell tolls that synchronized with our heartbeats. The bell's next toll should have marked 27 seconds, with mechanical precision. Instead, it skipped, silence stretching where sound should fall. 27 became 30, became 40. Time held its breath, counting heartbeats in a rhythm that belonged to something else. Then the bell tolled twice in rapid succession. Bronze voice doubling over itself in harmony that required two sources occupying impossible space. My wireframe shuddered, reality's architecture beginning to reconstruct itself around our trapped forms. The nave revealed architecture that had not been carved but grown. Calcified ribs formed frozen waves through liquid darkness, each arc suggesting massive respiration, interrupted mid-breath and petrified in devotional posture. Fused vertebrae created pews facing the dais with architectural hunger, their neural canals forming perfect acoustic chambers for whispered prayers that would never be heard. This was not construction. This was ossification of something vast that had died in genuflection. I pressed palm to nearest surface, felt texture like polished bone, yet translucent as cathedral glass. My augmetic enhancement revealed internal structure through wireframe overlay. Marrow chambers filled with crystallized darkness. Haversian canals conducting shadows instead of blood. The architecture breathed without lungs, pulsed without heart. Transept statues emerged from liquid shadow. Figures in tattered sororitas habits, their empty sockets polished smooth as mirrors. Not carved from stone, but preserved in bone glass. Flesh transmuted through process that left clothing intact while hollowing souls. Their mouths hung open in eternal litany, tongues crystallized mid-syllable. Body horror revealed itself in minute detail. Sinew filaments stretched, harp string taut between ribs, petrified mid-note in harmonies that would never resolve. Tendons formed bridgework across impossible spans, bearing loads of accumulated darkness. Someone had died singing here, and their song had become structural support. The air hummed with absence, not sound but memory of sound, vibrations seeking frequencies that had been consumed. My rebreather filtered nothing, because nothing remained to filter. We breathed, vacuum made tangible, void given substance through will, older than imperial doctrine. I approached bone glass pillar, etched with dual inscriptions. High Gothic intertwined with Mechanicus blessing runes, in patterns suggesting collaboration during chapel's construction. My linguistic cogitators passed the text. Apothecian node, where witness becomes wick, where light becomes cold, where prayer becomes binding. Below these words, smaller script in archaic binary. 0-point luminosity achieved. Blessed be the darkness that teaches sight. Korath, test discharge, Seraphia commanded. The Scion's hotshot laser-gun tagged empty space with targeting rune. Last bolt vanished without illumination. No flash, no heat signature, no impact. 3 heartbeats later, steam hissed against far wall where energy reappeared as thermal discharge. Heat had been stolen, transported, returned as ghost of itself. Weapon effectiveness compromised, Korath reported, voice steady despite impossibility. Humidity crystallized across our pauldrons in frost-patterned scripture, forming words that hurt to read directly. Ice wrote prayers using our armor as parchment, cold as stylus. On Seraphia's right shoulder, Gothic script manifested, see nothing, bind everything. The letters shifted as I watched, rearranging into warnings I refused to acknowledge. Zeta 9, advance reconnaissance, I commanded. The Skitarii Ranger moved through liquid shadow. Omnispecs arrays painting transept in wireframe. He approached what appeared to be shallow alcove carved into bone glass wall. His augmetic foot found purchase on stone that wasn't there. Reality inverted, His augmetic limb outlined in negative space. Blessed steel became void. Servo motors became hungry absence, reaching toward us with mechanical hunger. The alcove was not recession, but protrusion into dimensions human geometry could not accommodate. Dex's reaction saved Zeta 9's existence. Blessed steel tether snapped taut, hauling the Ranger backward through space that tried to keep him. His augmetic returned to normal outline, but frost-covered blessed steel in patterns that registered as pain in my optical arrays. Negative space confirmed, Zeta 9 reported, voice carrying binary static. Architecture extends in directions that do not exist. My heart rate spiked as telemetry registered impossible readings. Lux index dropped to -4, darkness so complete it possessed gravitational pull, bending light around itself like stellar mass. That was when I heard my own voice reciting litany I had never learned. Words spilled from my throat without conscious direction, archaic Gothic prayers to saints whose names tasted like ashes. Blessed be the blindness that teaches sight. Blessed be the darkness that births understanding. I had not spoken these words, yet my throat remembered their shape, my tongue their weight. Someone else's prayers used my vocal cords as instrument. Environmental wrongness assaulted every sense, cold that penetrated blessed ceramide, sound that traveled impossible distances through folded space, darkness with mass, weight, hunger that pulled at augmetic components like magnetic tide. The ground beneath our boots pitched subtly, not earthquake but architectural adjustment. My tactical slate redrew the transept in real time, showing floor sloping towards sealed black adamant altar. The incline had not existed moments before. Space was reshaping itself around our presence. The altar bore empty reliquary socket, its adamant surface drinking light so completely that a wireframe overlay failed to map dimensions. Scorch marks suggested recent violent extraction. Something had been removed. Something had been fed. Bell tolled 9 times in rapid succession, bronze voice multiplying through bone glass architecture until harmony became cacophony. Each toll synchronized with heartbeat footstep, breath drawn through rebreathers that filtered nothing. Then silence. Not absence of sound, but presence of unmaking, void given voice through architectural throat that had learned to sing. The stair spiraled upward, yet my altimeter registered descent with mechanical certainty. Each step climbed toward bone glass ceiling, while gravity insisted we plummeted through stone foundations into depths that violated Imperial understanding of architecture. Physics had become negotiable here. Fundamental laws rewritten by will, older than the Mechanicus. "Deploy tethers," Seraphia commanded, voice steady despite impossibility. Surrounding us, blessed steel carabiners bit into translucent bone glass with metallic prayer, each anchor point consecrated by whispered litanies. The material accepted our hardware reluctantly, molecular bonds shifting around blessed metal like healing flesh that remembered different rules. Time began slipping through our fingers like liquid shadow. My chronostamps looped 27-second segments of descent, digital readouts stuttering through identical intervals before resetting with mechanical persistence. We moved yet existed in recursive moment, climbing down while falling up through architecture that had learned to lie. I established cadence to preserve sanity when reality proved unreliable. 9 steps, I announced, voice echoing strangely through bone glass passages. Pause. 9 steps. Pause. Ritualized movement anchored consciousness to something resembling natural law, rhythm becoming litany against architectural madness. The others synchronized without command, boots finding translucent steps in harmony that resonated through impossible structure. We became percussion section in symphony, written by something that understood music's relationship to prayer, each footfall marking passage through folded space. Atmospheric pressure dropped until ears popped with painful release. Our breath fogged black momentarily, exhalation becoming shadow, carbon dioxide crystallizing into geometric patterns that spelled warnings in languages predating human speech. The cold possessed intelligence, selecting specific moments to manifest scripture across our rebreathers. Voices manifested from empty air, speaking words none of us had uttered. Korath heard his mother's voice reciting Tarsis' Ultra Catechism, prayers she had whispered over his crib during orc invasions. Place your sight upon the Emperor's hand, the phantom voice intoned with maternal warmth that made the Scion's shoulders tremble. Do not look into the night. Do not name the night. Tears froze on his cheek guards, crystallizing into rosary beads that clinked with each footfall. Canoness Seraphia paused mid-step, head cocked toward sounds only she could hear. Novice Quasar, she whispered, voice raw with suppressed emotion. Penitence litany from the orphanage sanctum. Young throats raised in harmony she had trained decades ago on Ophelia 7. Innocence preserved in stone that remembered every prayer ever spoken within its influence. 9 steps. Pause. My flamer's pilot light flickered, guttered, died. For 3 heartbeats coal flame licked inward, negative fire that sucked heat from blessed promethium, leaving frost patterns across sacred steel. The weapon became ice sculpture of itself before orange flame resumed, stuttering uncertainly against darkness that had learned to drink light. Body horror manifested in peripheral vision as I checked my grip on a bone glass rail. My own hand appeared inverted, bone-thin, waxy, fingers extended in blessing I had never learned. The flesh belonged to someone else, someone who had stood in this place centuries before and offered their sight to hungry darkness. When I looked directly, my hand returned to familiar augmetic housing and blessed flesh. 9 steps. Pause. The stair curved through dimensions human geometry could not accommodate, each step taking us deeper while climbing higher, further while approaching. Bone glass formed spiraling ribcage around our descent, each curve suggesting massive respiration interrupted and petrified in architectural prayer. Wind breathed against my neck. Impossible circulation through sealed architecture. Air moving in patterns that suggested something vast drawing breath through stone foundations. The current carried scents of candle wax and iron, old prayers and older blood. It tasted of saints whose names had been forgotten, martyrs whose sacrifice had been consumed by hungry architecture that fed on devotion itself. The ritual geometry governed our movement through folded space. 9 steps carried us through normal architecture. Pause allowed reality to resettle around our presence, dimensions to recalibrate according to laws that existed before imperial understanding. 9 more steps through adjusted space. The pattern preserved sanity when physics proved unreliable. Maintain cadence, I instructed, though my voice sounded like teacher in classroom, not my own. The spiral follows mathematical principles that predate human comprehension. Each sequence calculates precise distance through non-Euclidean space. Dex chuckled dryly, despite circumstances. Good to know the geometry's heretical, sir. Temperature continued dropping. Frost accumulated on weapon barrels. forming scripture that praised entities I refused to acknowledge. Cold wrote prayers using our equipment as parchment, ice as stylus spelling, devotions to darkness that had learned to sing. The stare tightened like closing throat, bone glass ribs arcing inward until we moved single file through passages that squeezed blessed ceramite. Metal scraped translucent surfaces with sound that tried to crawl into hearing's smallest spaces and nest there permanently. 9 steps. Pause. The chrono looped again, 27 seconds stretching like ligature around time itself. Face slapped her chronometer casing, making sound that was not quite sob. Reality stuttered, caught between moments like scratched recording. Below us, the chancel bloomed like bone flower opening to receive light it would never reflect. Broken sigil ring lay scattered across floor that had once been altar, adamant fragments spelling words in dead languages. Recent damage suggested violent extraction, something torn from containment with desperate haste. The bell tolled beneath our feet, not above or around, but below, rising through stone foundations from depths that should not exist. Bronze voice carried weight of accumulated centuries. Devotion compressed into sound that made bone glass architecture sing in harmony. Something vast stirred in spaces below space, disturbed by our descent through dimensions it had claimed as domain. The tolling synchronized with massive heartbeat, rhythm of entity that had slumbered in darkness, until light thieves fed it enough stolen radiance to remember wakefulness. We stood above something that was beginning to wake, and the bell's voice counted down our remaining time like funeral dirge played in reverse. The entity's feeding pattern manifested with predatory precision that violated every law of thermodynamics, blessed by the Omnissiah. Canoness Seraphia triggered her flamer's consecrated promethium, expecting emperor-blessed fire to cleanse unholy architecture. Instead, black flame erupted from the sacred nozzle, negative combustion that devoured heat rather than producing it, birthing hoarfrost across blessed steel with crystalline hunger. The weapon seized in her gauntlets as brittle ice locked blessed mechanisms. Promethium lines crystallized solid within heartbeats, fuel becoming frozen sculpture of itself. The flame licked inward, drinking warmth from ceramite and steel, leaving frost script across her power armor that spelled devotions in languages that hurt to read directly. Emperor's blood, Seraphia whispered, watching sacred fire become instrument of cold. The pilot light flickered between orange flame and hungry void, reality stuttering between natural law and architectural will. Our lumen charges died without warning, blessed machine spirits screaming error litanies as darkness metabolized their light offerings. Weapon status runes inverted to shadow glyphs. Green became anti-green. Amber became hungry absence that pulsed with internal darkness. Lars rifle power packs registered full charge, yet emitted no illumination when triggered. Energy existed, but had been taught different masters. Korath's helmet lamp died, returned as bruise on air, died again. His visor HUD repainted itself in chalk outline negatives. Targeting runes became void shapes. Rangefinders measured distances that didn't exist. The chapel was rewriting blessed technology according to older mathematics. Air began bending toward the dais with visible distortion. Atmospheric currents drawn like breath into hungry throat. Our exhalations streamed forward in ghostly ribbons. Carbon dioxide becoming offering to something that fed on more than photons. Each breath shortened, pulled from lungs before fully expelled, the chapel inhaling our life essence with mechanical patience. My augmetic enhancement registered inverse image overlay. Void bright silhouettes surrounding us like photographic negatives. Where darkness should exist, brilliant absence outlined our forms. Where light should illuminate, hungry shadow consumed every photon. We existed in negative space, reality inverted around our presence like film, exposed to impossible radiance. It metabolizes photons, I reported, voice steady despite horror crawling up my spine, converts light into mnemonic imprint, stealing identity through illumination. Faces appeared in translucent, bone glass walls. Human features pressed against interior surfaces, like drowning souls seeking air. Their hollow bulb mouths opened and closed in silent song. Eyes rolled back, showing only whites that gleamed with borrowed light. They had been singing when architecture consumed them, voices becoming structural harmony in chapel's throat. Between vertebrae forming the chapel's ribs, microscopic script revealed itself to augmetic enhancement. Saint, Lumen's second sin, she who fed light to hungry darkness, she who taught shadows to sing, she who bound witness to wick. The letters shifted as I watched, rearranging into warnings that made my optical arrays ache with harmonic dissonance. The entity was stealing memories through every photon we reflected, understanding our thoughts through light that had touched our faces. It knew us now through our illumination, could speak with voices of those we had loved, lost, forgotten. The bell tolled thrice, not bronze voice, but grinding like massive teeth, chewing through stone foundations. Each toll synchronized with our heartbeats, rhythm becoming invasive harmony that tried to align our pulse with entity's appetite. Sound carried weight of accumulated centuries. Devotion compressed into acoustic weapon. Korath's helmet lamp activated without command, emitting child's laughter in perfect 27-second loop. High giggle, innocent and terrible, repeated with mechanical precision. The sound belonged to someone who had stood here centuries ago, offering joy to darkness that had learned to digest happiness. Off, Korath grated, clawing at control circuits. It is off, Dex reported, staring at his own dead equipment. The laughter continued, playing from speakers that registered no power draw, no signal source, no explanation beyond architectural will that had learned to mock human comfort. War chant of St. Drusus, Seraphia commanded, voice cutting through impossible acoustics. She began reciting battle hymn that had broken Xenos lines across 17 sectors, words carrying weight of accumulated victory. Imperator mortis, lux in tenebris, cor meum in igne tuo. I overlaid Binharic counterharmonics, machine prayers weaving through her litany in patterns, designed to confuse entities that fed on singular devotion. Binary cant provided mathematical precision to balance her emotional intensity, creating harmony that belonged to neither flesh nor steel, alone. Our voices rose through bone glass architecture, sound waves bending around impossible curves. The chapel sang with us, against us, through us. Architectural throat that had learned to harmonize with human prayer while digesting the singers. The faces in bone glass began screaming silently. Mouths stretched beyond human capacity, eye sockets weeping light instead of tears. They had been bound here through their own illumination, trapped by photons they had produced in final moments of terror and devotion. Black flame licked upward from cracks in the dais, negative fire consuming heat while producing hoarfrost that wrote names across stone. Names of saints whose martyrdom had involved voluntary blindness. The entity fed more aggressively, metabolizing our presence through every photon we reflected, every breath we exhaled. Body horror manifested as team members appeared inverted in peripheral vision. Flesh become void, void become flesh. Identities flickering between presence and absence. We existed and didn't exist simultaneously, caught between states of being that entity found digestible. My wireframe overlay began tearing like ancient parchment, reality's architecture peeling away to reveal deeper structure. The noospheric feed, previously curtailed by Chapel's influence, suddenly expanded with overwhelming clarity. Beneath the dais, stone dissolved into complex diagram of power. An intact tri-ring array rotated in dimensional space, concentric circles of blessed adamant designed to contain something vast. Ancient Mechanicus craftsmanship married to Ministorum binding prayers, collaboration that predated current doctrine. One ring showed hairline crack, leaking black-blue aurora, stellar fire that belonged to spaces between stars. The containment had been breached by recent violence, scav marks, tool scratches, desperate extraction that had fed entity enough stolen light to remember its name. The aurora crawled across stone foundations, like living light, reaching toward our boots with predatory patience. Where it touched bone glass, architecture began singing in harmonies that preceded human understanding of music. Reality's wireframe continued tearing, revealing something uncoiling in spaces below space. Entity that had slumbered in darkness until light thieves fed it, enough stolen radiance to focus vast intelligence on the illuminated morsels that had descended into its domain. The black-blue aurora reached our position as something ancient began pushing through the smiling crack in reality's flesh. Investigation under duress demanded precision when reality proved unreliable. I deployed the data thurible with reverent efficiency, blessed incense falling as black snow through air that had learned to invert sacred smoke. The crawl space beneath the dais compressed around my augmetic frame, bone glass ribs forming miniature cathedral vault. Architecture designed for penitent examination of mysteries that demanded prostration before understanding. The space reeked of candle wax and iron, old prayers and older blood. My rebreather filtered nothing because nothing remained to filter. We breathed vacuum made tangible, void given substance through will that predated imperial doctrine. Each exhalation streamed toward the dais as offering to something that fed on more than photons. 3 concentric runic rings rotated in dimensional space beneath stone foundations, each circle inscribed with mathematics that violated current understanding. The outermost ring remained intact, blessed adamant, etched with high Gothic prayers and Mechanicus blessing runes in perfect fusion. Cog and Aquila intertwined where ring joints met, theological synthesis suggesting collaboration during Chapel's construction. The middle ring showed hairline fracture leaking black-blue aurora with stellar intensity. Recent violence had scarred the edges, tool marks suggesting desperate extraction performed with inadequate equipment. Someone had broken containment with crude instruments and desperate haste, feeding entity enough stolen light to remember its name. The innermost ring bore substance that refused light more completely than vacuum itself. Not darkness, absence so complete it possessed gravitational pull, bending photons around its circumference like stellar mass. When I pressed augmetic fingertips against its surface, existential cold drained heat from blessed steel through contact alone. Adamant plate riveted between rings bore inscription in dual script. Apothecian node, blind the hunger, bind the witness, never let light fall. Below these words, smaller text in archaic binary. Containment protocol ombre Witness becomes wick. Light becomes cold. Prayer becomes binding. The mathematics were elegant in their horror. Entity fed on photons, converting illumination to mnemonic imprint, stealing identity through light. Containment required voluntary blindness, witness offering sight to become living anchor, consciousness bound to a ray through sacrifice of vision. Human soul inverted to serve as lock against hungry darkness. My servo skull detected metallic resonance within ring structure, ancient Vox recording trapped in blessed steel, like prayer fossilized in stone. I activated playback protocols, machine spirit coaxing ghost voices from adamant that remembered every word spoken during containment's creation. Sororita's choir sang binding antiphon in perfect harmony, young voices raised in devotion that transcended death. The melody matched exactly the woman's prayer, looping through our Vox systems. Same cadence, same syllables, same desperate faith offered to darkness that had learned to digest hope. Ave Imperator, lux in tenebris, the ghost choir sang, voices growing distant as recording degraded. Bind the witness, blind the hunger, never let light fall on what sleeps below. Ave Imperator, cold flame ascending, prayer becoming chain. Humidity spiked around the rings, moisture crystallizing into geometric patterns that spelled warnings in languages predating human speech. Frost beaded as tears in statue eye sockets, bone glass faces weeping ice scripture that praised entities I refused to acknowledge. Fresh, scav tool scratches marred the broken ring's circumference, crude marks suggesting extraction performed with blessed promethium cutters. Someone had inserted object into ring structure, then removed it with violent haste. The tool marks bore Imperial equipment signatures, suggesting Survey Cohort Gamma 7's final fatal mistake. They fed the system, I reported, through degrading Vox, inserted light source into containment breach. Above me, Seraphia's voice carried weight of accumulated horror. Emperor's mercy, they couldn't have known. Anomaly creeping up tethers, Zeta 9 reported. Omnispecs arrays tracking black-blue aurora ascending blessed steel lifelines. Like oil seeking higher ground, estimated surface breach, 14 minutes. The substance climbed our equipment with predatory patience, entity testing boundaries through physical contact. Where aurora touched carabiners, metal sang in harmonies that preceded human understanding of music. Our lifelines were becoming instruments in symphony, written by something that understood music's relationship to prayer. Telemetry burst through degrading noospheric connection in chaotic cascade. Static resolved into sigil pattern. Number 27 repeated in geometric progression. Mathematical harmony synchronizing with entities' breathing. My pulse registered a rhythmic response, heartbeat attempting to align with rhythm older than human circulation. The ghost choir reached crescendo where binding usually tightened, then cut mid-phrase as if severed by blade. Digital silence stretched until ears ached with absence. Through the gap, spilled voice not recorded but alive. Sister's voice from centuries past speaking coordinates with desperate precision. Lex Mechanic, she said, and my name was not my name in her mouth. Sanctum umbrae beneath chancel floor. Secondary containment 17 meters down spiral. Antiphon resumes below. The transmission carried weight of accumulated terror. Coordinates burned into Vox memory with mathematical precision. Deeper chambers. Secondary containment. The entity had been imprisoned within imprisonment. Rings within rings. Prayers within prayers. Static swallowed her final words as something vast stirred in spaces below space, disturbed by our investigation of containment that had held it in dimensional suspension for centuries. The black-blue aurora pulsed with entity's heartbeat, counting down our remaining time like funeral dirge played in reverse. Somewhere deeper in architectural throat, secondary containment waited with its own hungers and its own prices, and the sister's phantom voice whispered coordinates that led down into darkness where light had never reached. Understanding crystallized in my augmetic consciousness with mathematical precision that violated every theological doctrine blessed by the Adeptus Ministorum. The synthesis emerged through cascading horror logic, each data point connecting until the impossible became merely improbable, then inevitable. This was not chapel, but machine church, architectural hybrid imprisoning warp predator that consumed photons as sustenance, metabolizing illumination into memory soul residue, using light itself as vector for psychic digestion. The entity fed on radiance and defecated consciousness, rendering identity into mnemonic tar that smeared itself through bone glass architecture with patient hunger. Emperor's blood, I whispered, Vox grill crackling with static. It eats daylight, converts photons to memory fragments, stealing identity through illumination itself. The tri-ring stasis array had maintained containment through enforced blindness. Dimensional mathematics, creating null space where entity existed without feeding. The witness referenced in M36 protocols was living I-soul voluntarily bound to node, consciousness sacrificed to observe without illuminating, becoming a living anchor between predator and reality through martyrdom of sight. The witness becomes wick, I continued. Augmetic arrays passing containment schematics with mechanical reverence. Human candle-burning consciousness instead of wax, maintaining null environment through perpetual sacrifice. Original architects had utilized Sororita's antiphon, working in concert with blessed reliquary. Choir providing harmonic binding, while artifact inverted light too cold, creating dry darkness that starved entity into dimensional suspension. The reliquary served as photonic inverter, technological martyrdom converting illumination to hoarfrost, maintaining stasis through centuries of accumulated cold. Survey cohort, Gamma 7's black candle had been key, not ward. The inverted light source fed entity directly through containment breach, metabolic pressure cracking reliquary until primary binding failed. Scorch marks, tool scratches, and frozen lumen coil marked their final fatal mistake. Curiosity weaponized by ignorance. Solution presented itself with cold logic that made my augmetic systems ache with recognition. Restore blindness through total photonic deprivation. Extinguish all illumination, including photic augmetics. Transport fissured reliquary core to broken ring. Seeing antiphon with binharic harmonic overlay to lock dimensional mathematics. The mathematics were elegant in their horror. Any photon during transit would feed entity exponentially. Single lumen pulse sufficient to grant full manifestation. We required absolute darkness. Null environment where hungry void possessed gravitational pull, yet found nothing to consume. Ahead, black-blue aurora pooled in photonic well, stellar fires swaying like curtains hung in dimensional wind. The entity gathered strength through accumulated radiance, consciousness focusing through medium that belonged to spaces between stars. Where aurora touched stone, architecture sang in harmonies preceding human understanding of music. I'll take point, Seraphia declared. Flamer raised despite compromised Prometheum systems. Negative canoness. I initiated augmetic shutdown protocols, photic arrays retracting with mechanical prayer. My ocular enhancement quantum synced. Two blessed steel, perfect conduits for entity feeding. I carry reliquary core. Augmetics can shutter completely, achieving absolute darkness around vital components. Bureaucratic protocols warred with tactical necessity until mathematics supported my argument. I filed internal writ, my consciousness believed. Ordo Hereticus Containment, Order Theta 27. Subclause Ombre. Authority Provisional. Sanctity Conditional. Success metric measured in suppression of photonic events. Omnisire guide your calculations. Seraphia acknowledged. Voice carrying weight of accumulated duty. I extracted reliquary core from adamant housing. Blessed artifact pulsing with cold that drained heat from augmetic fingertips. Crystallized darkness resembling photonic inverter that had converted centuries of illumination to hoarfrost, maintaining null environment through technological martyrdom. Hairline cracks leaked stellar fire, requiring immediate containment. Total illumination shutdown, I commanded, voice steady despite existential terror. Seal all lumen sources. Shutter augmetic arrays. Maintain contact through tether tension only. Weapon status lights died with electronic whispers. Helmet displays faded to blessed darkness. My augmetic enhancement retracted behind blessed steel shutters, designed for void warfare yet never tested under these conditions. The chapel sighed like courthouse accepting plea, preparing to judge us strictly without passion. Roles confirmed, I announced into darkness that possessed physical mass. I carry core. Seraphia maintains antiphon. Korath secures perimeter. Dex counts cadence. Zeta 9 monitors structural integrity. Thais holds Vox silence like relic. Seraphia's voice cut through absolute void with blade-steady devotion. Ave Imperator, lux in tenebris. Bind the witness, blind the hunger. I overlaid Binharic counterharmonics, machine prayers weaving through her litany in patterns designed to confuse entities feeding on singular devotion. Binary Kant provided mathematical precision balancing emotional intensity, creating harmony belonging to neither flesh nor steel alone. The aurora tested us with whispered sunrise, warmth against cheek, child's laughter looping 27 seconds exactly, phantom light promising audience with ourselves. We denied testimony, refused that invocation together through discipline scaffolded by doctrine. Bell began tolling, not bronze voice but grinding like massive teeth chewing through dimensional barriers. 27 times the sound carried weight of accumulated centuries, each toll marking step toward salvation or consumption. 27, 26, 25. The reliquary pulsed with cold heartbeat, counting down through temperature differential, while reality bent around impossible radiance leaking from hairline cracks. We sealed eyes against darkness that had learned to sing, inhaled cold tasting of saints whose names had been forgotten, stepped forward into space where light had never reached, and something vast was remembering its hunger through stolen radiance. The counting continued as we entered photonic well, and architectural throat prepared to swallow illumination itself. The world became pressure differential, and temperature gradient, bitter incense smell like iron filings dissolved in ancient prayer. My augmetic ocular jacks ached with phantom pain, ghost signals from shuttered arrays trying to process illumination that didn't exist. Nerve endings firing in patterns that spelled warnings across interior darkness. Stone texture transmitted through blessed gloves with tactile precision my enhancement had never required before shutdown. Each footfall registered microscopic variations. Smooth bone glass worn by centuries of penitent passage, rough adamant scarred by tool marks, crystalline formations that clicked like rosary beads beneath ceramite boots. I counted steps through tongue pulse against teeth. Primitive chronometer marking cadence when digital systems proved unreliable. The reliquary core pulsed with cold heartbeat in my hands. Temperature differential providing navigation reference through absolute darkness that possessed gravitational pull. Breath, step, cold. Navigation required constant contact. Carabiners scraping bone glass with metallic prayer, shoulder hands confirming position through ceramite, blessed steel tethers transmitting tension through space that remembered different rules. We moved through architecture, bending around our passage like healing flesh, reluctant to accommodate imperial presence. The entity whispered, using voices of Survey Cohort Gamma 7, phantom throats speaking words the dead had never uttered. Lex Mechanic, Sergeant Koros called, smoker's rasp carrying weight of 17 commendation studs. Open your eyes. See what we found down here. Light so beautiful it burns cold. Every 27 heartbeats the bell throbbed through bone foundations. Not sound but vibration, traveling through stone and accumulated darkness. Bronze voice became physical sensation. Pressure wave that tried to align our pulse with entity's appetite. Rhythm invasive as parasites seeking cardiac synchronization. Your father's cough, the entity whispered, voice shifting to Hive Tenebra's industrial wheeze that had marked my childhood. Remember how he sounded in Manufactorum darkness. Open your eyes, Yosek. Let me show you light he never lived to see. The phantom voice carried precise vocal patterns. Laryngeal scarring from chemical inhalation. Emphysemic rasp from decades breathing recycled air. It knew me through photons I had reflected, understood my history through illumination that had touched my face during moments of memory. Seraphia's antiphon continued steady as heartbeat. Ave Imperator, lux in tenebris, bind the witness, blind the hunger. Her power armor clinked with mechanical prayer, each servo motor adjustment, marking position relative to my augmetic frame. I overlaid Binharic counter-harmonics, machine prayers weaving through her litany in patterns designed to confuse entities feeding on singular devotion. Binary Kant provided mathematical precision, balancing emotional intensity, creating harmony belonging to neither flesh nor steel alone. Breath, step, cold. Entity tested us with false sunrise, phantom warmth against right cheek, salt skin smell of ocean worlds I had never visited, distant gulls crying over unseen horizons. The sensory assault carried weight of accumulated longing, memories that belonged to someone else pressed against consciousness like lovers' whisper. Korath turned toward phantom warmth, helmet tracking non-existent sunrise with mechanical precision. His boots scraped stone as he pivoted, seeking illumination that would feed entity exponentially through single photon exchange. I slammed him down with augmetic strength, ceramite crashing against bone glass as blessed steel housing met ancient architecture. Litany of blindness, I commanded, voice cutting through impossible acoustics. Blessed be the darkness that teaches sight. Blessed be the void that shows truth. Ave Imperator, guardian of necessary ignorance. Contact maintained, Korath whispered, voice steady despite phantom visions. Emperor protects through necessary blindness. The entity's whispers became invasive, pressing memories against consciousness like surgical instruments seeking purchase in soft tissue. Novitiate Alia's face appeared in interior darkness. Young woman I had never met, yet her memories flooded through my augmetic arrays with impossible clarity. She had stood in this place centuries ago during M36 containment protocols. Her final prayer echoed through my throat. Let me be wick that burns without light, witness that sees without illumination. Her sacrifice had maintained binding until scavengers broke containment through ignorant curiosity-feeding entity, stolen radiance. The memories weren't mine, yet felt more real than augmetic enhancement, more true than blessed steel housing consciousness and skull vault of accumulated duty. Aaliyah's devotion burned through neural pathways like acid, showing me chapel as it had existed during original binding. Choir singing antiphon, candles burning cold, darkness held in dimensional suspension through martyrdom of sight, breath, step, cold. Temperature dropped another 8 degrees as we approached breach point. The reliquary core pulsed with increasing frequency, crystallized darkness responding to proximity with entity's dimensional anchor. Hairline cracks leaked stellar fire that tasted of saints whose names had been forgotten. My boots found edgework through tactile navigation. Rough, adamant circumference scarred by recent violence. The broken ring waited ahead. Geometric precision that violated current architectural understanding. 3 concentric circles designed to contain something vast through accumulated prayer and technological. Martyrdom air bent toward dais with visible distortion. Atmospheric currents drawn like breath into hungry throat. Each exhalation shortened, pulled from lungs before fully expelled. Chapel inhaling our life essence with mechanical patience that had learned to digest hope itself. The bell throbbed 27 times in rapid succession, bronze voice multiplying through bone glass architecture until harmony became cacophony. Each toll synchronized with heartbeat, footstep, breath drawn through rebreathers that filtered nothing because nothing remained to filter. My shuttered augmetics flared without command, blessed steel plates retracting like mechanical flowers, seeking illumination that shouldn't exist. For 1 heartbeat's duration, wireframe overlay revealed impossible vista beneath stone foundations. The sky looked up at us with hungry patience. Shifting constellations see with darkness for water and stars that moved in deliberate patterns, spelling entity's true name across dimensional mathematics. Black-blue aurora writhed like cosmic serpent through inverted firmament, and something vast began pushing through cracks in reality's flesh as my augmetics sealed again. We stood above something that was learning to wake, and the broken ring waited for sacrifice that might restore binding or feed entity, enough stolen light to achieve full manifestation in Imperial space. The ritual began with mathematical precision, blessed by accumulated doctrine. I positioned the fissured reliquary core within broken ring circumference, crystallized darkness pulsing with cold heartbeat against augmetic fingertips. Seraphia's antiphon rose through bone glass architecture with blade-steady devotion, sacred syllables carrying weight of 17 purge campaigns. The intact rings hummed with dimensional frequency, blessed adamant vibrating in harmonies that preceded human understanding of music. Crack lines glittered with hoarfrost as my Binharic counterpoint wove through her hymn. Machine prayers providing mathematical precision to balance emotional intensity, creating synthesis belonging to neither flesh nor steel alone. Ave Imperator, lux in tenebris, Seraphia chanted, voice unwavering despite circumstances. Bind the witness, blind the hunger, never let light fall on what sleeps below. I overlaid binary count in precise intervals. 0 1 0 0 1 0 0 0 1 1 0 1 1 1 1 1 1 0 1 1 0 1 1 0 0 0 1 1 1 1 0 0 1. Holy is the machine, sacred numbers flowing through blessed vox grill like liquid prayer, each digit carrying weight of accumulated service to throne and omnis sire. The ritual should have worked. Harmonic binding aligned, dimensional mathematics stabilized, containment protocols executed with theological precision that had sealed entities across 7 sectors. Instead, RuneScript began flipping like photographic negative, Gothic prayers inverting to languages that hurt to perceive, blessing marks becoming accusations spelled in stellar fire. Understanding crystallized with horror. That made my augmetic systems ache with recognition. The third ring had never been broken. It had been inverted. Dimensional mathematics required living witness soul as wick. Consciousness voluntarily sacrificed to maintain null environment through martyrdom of sight. The machine needed human candle-burning awareness instead of wax. Emperor's blood, I whispered through degrading vox. The reliquary isn't lantern, it's chalice. Requires living witness to drink darkness, become anchor between entity and reality. The entity's hunger could only be blinded by bound eye watching without illumination. Human soul inverted to serve as lock against photophagic predator feeding on consciousness itself. Someone had to offer sight and sanity to architectural throat that had learned to digest devotion through accumulated centuries. I volunteer sight and soul, Seraphia declared, power armor servos whining as she knelt beside broken ring. Let me be wick that burns without light, witness that sees without illumination. Negative canoness, I calculated probabilities with mechanical precision, augmetic arrays passing survival matrices despite shuttered status. Your faith burns too bright, entity would feast on devotion. My photic enhancement quantum synced to blessed steel, perfect conduits for inversion, logical choice for null space anchor. Yet duty choked in throat like ashes, accumulated service records warring with existential terror that made blessed steel housing tremble around consciousness. Awe and dread married in augmetic skull vault, producing offspring that tasted of saints whose names had been forgotten, martyrs whose sacrifice had been consumed by hungry architecture. Cold deepened beyond discomfort into active pain. Hypothermia onset marking, countdown toward containment failure. Frost grew in mouth like crystalline prayer, each breath producing ice scripture that spelled devotions in languages pre-dating human speech. Micro cliffhangers punctuated decision space, Theis's vox cutting to static mid-syllable, my hand slipping on frost-slick reliquary core, taut tether transmitting tension through blessed steel as entity tested boundaries with predatory patience. Each sensation carried weight of accumulated horror, reality bending around our presence like healing flesh, reluctant to accommodate imperial martyrdom. Vision invaded consciousness without warning. Myself 6 months hence, eyeless and calm, humming antiphon to pupilless child born in hive sections where light never quite reached. Phantom future showed acceptance carved in augmetic features, peace purchased through voluntary blindness that had learned to see truth beyond illumination. The child will need teacher, phantom voice whispered through my throat. Someone who understands darkness as blessing, void as gift. You will guide them through necessary ignorance. Military vocabulary warred with religious terminology in consciousness scaffolded by doctrine. Duty versus horror. Service versus survival. Mathematics versus humanity. The entity fed on indecision, metabolizing uncertainty into strength while containment degraded through accumulated hesitation. Choose quickly, Lex Mechanic, Seraphia urged, voice carrying weight of accumulated command. Entity gathers strength through our delay. The reliquary core pulsed with increasing frequency, hairline cracks leaking stellar fire that belong to spaces between stars. Where aurora touched blessed steel, metal sang in harmonies that preceded human understanding of music. Architecture prepared to digest whichever soul offered itself as anchor against hungry darkness. Behind us, something vast stirred in dimensional suspension, consciousness older than imperial doctrine focusing through accumulated radiance. The thing that ate daylight, whispered promises using voices of everyone I had ever loved, offering visions for single photon exchange. Entity surged through dimensional breach with vacuum cold that stole heat from ceramite and blessed steel. Black aurora lashed across stone foundations, like cosmic whip. Stellar fire-writing entity's true name in mathematical progression that hurt to perceive directly. The hungry darkness reached for my shuttered augmetics with predatory patience, testing boundaries through accumulated light hunger. I held exhalation that might be final breath, reliquary core burning cold in augmetic hands, while duty and humanity warred in consciousness, scaffolded by service to throne and omnisire. The choice required next heartbeat's duration, offer sight to hungry darkness, or watch entity achieve full manifestation in imperial space. The black aurora touched my shuttered arrays with stellar hunger, and something vast prepared to judge my decision with patience, older than stars themselves. Negative canoness, I declared, voice steady despite existential terror clawing at consciousness. My augmetic arrays quantum synced to blessed steel, perfect conduits for dimensional inversion. Logic demands my sacrifice. The ritual proceeded with clinical precision, blessed by accumulated doctrine. I knelt within the broken ring, reliquary core pulsing like cold heart against augmetic fingertips. Blessed steel locks retracted with mechanical prayer, each mechanism disengaging through servo-motor hymns that echoed through bone-glass architecture. Binary hymnal, 001, I intoned, beginning sacred disassembly. Flesh is weak, machine eternal. Through iron we serve. Chromed housings unscrewed with reverent efficiency, revealing latticed optic bundles veined with prayer-etched cabling. Steam-haloed exposed assemblies as chapel ingested heat with ledger clock patience. Phenol-sanctified monoblade emerged from utility housing, molecular edge blessed by tech Dominus car during 17-hour consecration. The blade hummed with machine spirit devotion, eager to serve in sacrifice, preserving imperial doctrine through technological martyrdom. Binary, hymnal 010, first cut through sinew cable connecting blessed steel to organic substrate. The cable parted with sound like prayer interrupted. Blessed filaments revealing crystalline core pulsing with accumulated service. No blood flowed, only cold, existential temperature belonging to spaces between stars. Seraphia's antiphon rose like protective wall. Ave Imperator, lux in tenebris. Guide your servant through necessary blindness. Her voice carried weight of 17 purge campaigns, unwavering despite architectural horror surrounding ritual space. Binary hymnal 011. Optic fiber bundle separated with surgical precision, each strand carrying decades of visual data. Memories preserved in quantum light illuminating 17 war zones. Fiber sparked once, brief aurora containing every face I had seen, then died to blessed darkness. Korath and Dex maintained useless perimeter, hot-shot laser guns tracking threats, existing beyond conventional targeting. Professional soldiers preserving discipline, while reality bent around hunger that had learned to digest devotion through accumulated centuries. Final severance targeted, nerve cluster connecting enhancement to organic consciousness. Monoblade found perches in tissue-serving throne and omnissiah across 7 sectors. The cut produced sensation beyond pain, transcendence through technological martyrdom, consciousness expanding as physical sight contracted to blessed void. Cold gushed from empty sockets, not blood, but existential temperature, void so pure it possessed weight. Crystalline darkness flowed like liquid prayer into reliquary core drinking blessed offerings with hungry patience. Body horror merged with religious reverence as chromed casings clattered against stone like rosary beads, marking final prayer. I pressed empty sockets to reliquary rim, blessed bone-meeting crystallized darkness that had learned converting illumination to hoarfrost through centuries of service. Contact burned with void temperature rewriting neural pathways according to architectural will. Lux and non intra, I whispered through degrading vox. Light does not enter. Witness becomes wick. Darkness teaches sight. Black flame licked through sockets. Negative fire consuming heat while producing understanding. Entities hunger-tested boundaries through accumulated light starvation, surgical instruments seeking purchase in consciousness, scaffolded by duty. Tri-rings seized with mechanical authority, blessed adamant clanking into place as dimensional mathematics locked around sacrificial anchor. Sound carried weight of accumulated centuries. Devotion compressed into acoustic harmony, making bone glass sing in frequencies preceding human understanding. Entity screamed in non-sound, subtraction of all acoustic phenomena. Void given voice through architectural throat. Scream pulled at consciousness like gravitational tide, attempting to drag awareness into spaces where hungry darkness fed on identity itself. Bell. Toll became continuous hum, bronze voice stretching into harmonic synchronizing with heartbeat, breath, reliquary pulse. Sound carried blessing and curse simultaneously, salvation through martyrdom echoing across centuries. Sensory experience collapsed, iron taste flooding mouth, old wax smell rising from foundations, bone glass texture transmitted through fingertips, learning to see through touch alone. Reality compressed to essential elements, while consciousness expanded through mathematics, violating imperial understanding. Yet Antiphon took more than sight. Lost memories rose in negative halos. Survey cohort Gamma 7, standing with phantom illumination. M36 sororitors, choir singing binding hymns. Scavengers who had broken containment through ignorant curiosity. They begged not to be extinguished. Consciousness preserved in crystallized darkness, metabolizing identity through accumulated centuries. "Don't let us fade," Sergeant Chorus whispered, voice carrying 17 commendation studs. "We serve still. We witness still." Phantom voices multiplied, every soul feeding entity through stolen light, every consciousness digested by architectural hunger, every identity preserved in reliquary, becoming cemetery for illuminated dead. Through empty sockets, learning to see without light, I perceived future voice completing antiphon lines inside reliquary core. My own throat, months hence singing binding hymns to pupilless child, born where darkness had become blessing. Ave Imperator, guardian of necessary ignorance, the phantom voice intoned with my vocal patterns, yet cooled by resignation I had not yet purchased. The prayer continues in spaces where light never reached. The absent storm struck with vacuum-cold precision that violated thermodynamic law. Floor rippled beneath my knees like massive tendon. Bone glass architecture flexing around entities awakening hunger with architectural agony. Black aurora whipped through chancel space, stellar fire condensing into geometric curtains, that hurt to perceive through empty sockets, learning to see without light. Seraphia's chant turned harsh, liturgical blade cutting through impossible acoustics. Ave Imperator, lux in tenebris. Her voice carried weight of 17 purge campaigns, each syllable forged in furnace of accumulated service. Ritual met with ritual, as entity responded, through architectural throat that had learned to sing in harmonies preceding human understanding. I existed suspended a chapel void seam, consciousness anchored between reality and hungry darkness through voluntary blindness. Present and not present simultaneously, awareness expanded through mathematics, violating imperial doctrine, while flesh remained bound to crystallized prayer. My noosphere connection severed completely. Blessed data streams dying to static, as entities' hunger consumed electromagnetic spectrum. Entity tested bargains with predatory patience, offering visions through empty sockets that ached with phantom radiance. Restore your augmetics, it whispered, using Tech Dominus Car's voice. Binary cant corrupted by stellar hunger. See blessed schematics again. Calculate probabilities with mechanical precision. Serve Omnissiah through illuminated understanding. Personal memories followed. Father's industrial wheeze in manufactorum darkness. Mother's rough palms blessing my brow before conscription. Unlived moments stretching toward impossible futures. Accept one photon, entity bargained. Single lumen pulse. See faces you have loved through true illumination, not memory's pale shadow. Lux non intrat, I refused, each word frosting bone glass with crystalline prayer. Light does not enter. Witness becomes wick. Darkness teaches sight. Syllables carried weight of accumulated martyrdom. Consciousness offered to architectural hunger that had learned to digest devotion through centuries of patient feeding. Tri-rings engaged with mechanical authority. Outer and middle rings clanking into dimensional lock. Blessed adamant vibrating with antiphon's power. Yet broken inner rings struggled. Hairline fracture freezing at edges while attempting to bridge through accumulated will. Containment held partially. Entity's manifestation constrained yet not eliminated. Telemetry spiked through degrading systems before dying completely. Catastrophe erupted without warning. Reliquary core fractured along stress lines accumulated through centuries of service. Crystallized darkness splitting like cracked egg. Stored daylight, photons inverted and trapped within blessed housing. Burst sunlight beneath stone foundations. Illumination compressed through dimensional mathematics, exploding in cascade of stolen radiance. Light blazed through empty sockets with stellar intensity, phantom brightness burning neural pathways, while entity inhaled, released radiance with mechanical hunger. Every photon trapped through centuries erupted simultaneously. Candle flame and lumen strip, sunrise memory and blessed illumination, all compressed into single moment of impossible brilliance feeding hungry darkness. Korath screamed, blessed ceramide cracking as thermal shock reversed hypothermia to stellar heat. His rebreather vented steam while body temperature spiked beyond human tolerance, blood vessels expanding past design parameters. Emperor's mercy, he gasped, voice distorted by atmospheric pressure, differential. Zeta 9's augmetic eye boiled in housing, blessed steel expanding beyond tolerance as optical arrays overloaded through photonic cascade. Binary cant became electronic shriek as machine spirit died screaming prayers to Omnissiah, servo skull crashing against bone glass with sound like shattered rosary beads. Seraphia's flamer pilot light burst into black frost flower, negative combustion spreading across blessed promethium lines with crystalline hunger. Her power armor seized as heating elements inverted, warmth becoming existential cold that penetrated ceramite through accumulated temperature differential. Environmental chaos emphasized wrongness through weather-violating natural law. Humidity crystallized into geometric snow falling upward toward bone glass ceiling. Atmospheric pressure spiked, then plummeted, ears popping with painful release. Wind howled through sealed architecture, circulation patterns suggesting massive respiration, drawing breath through stone foundations. Entity swelled, filling chancel with hungry presence. Consciousness expanding through released illumination, like flower blooming in temporal acceleration. Ancient appetite focused through accumulated radiance, stellar intelligence examining imperial morsels that had descended into domain, claimed through centuries of patient feeding. Binding wavered as third ring struggled to complete circuit around entity achieving full manifestation. Dimensional mathematics strained against hunger, older than imperial doctrine. Containment protocols designed for sleeping predator, failing against complete awakening, fed by centuries of trapped daylight. My empty sockets ached with impossible brightness. Not illumination, but memory of light. Phantom radiance searing through neural pathways, rewritten by voluntary blindness. Entity's true form pressed against consciousness like surgical instrument. Through sockets learning to see without light, I perceived entity's vastness. Intelligence spanning dimensions, human geometry could not accommodate. Appetite that had consumed civilizations before terror learned to worship Emperor's name. It inhaled released photons with satisfaction, belonging to predator finally achieving full feeding after centuries of dimensional starvation. The ancient hunger had fully awakened, and my binding protocols wavered, like candle flame in stellar wind. Understanding crystallized like blades slipped between augmetic plates. Ritual's true purpose inverted through voluntary blindness that had learned to see. Not injection of light, but abscondment. Not feeding entity, but starving it through absolute consumption. The void needed to swallow flood, consciousness becoming null space where illumination died before touching hungry darkness. I am the chalice, I whispered, through degrading vox. I am the unflame. I offered myself as that void, surrendering to reliquary fracture with devotion transcending flesh and steel. Released daylight poured into skull hollows, where augmetic arrays had served throne and omnissiah across 7 sectors. Centuries of trapped photons flooded through empty sockets. Illumination seeking purchase in consciousness rewritten by voluntary blindness. Light poured in reverse flames. Stellar fire flowing inward through neural pathways, learning to metabolize radiance instead of conducting electrical prayer. Each photon carried weight of accumulated existence. Memories compressed into illumination that tasted of summer and ash simultaneously. I heard choirs singing in crystalline. Tears, machine hymns, harmonizing with organic devotion across impossible octaves, saw-tooth frequencies that preceded human understanding of music. 1,000 hands touched awareness through accumulated radiance. Every palm that had reflected light, now digested by consciousness, becoming null lantern. Children's laughter from hive schools. Workers' prayers in manufactorum darkness. Soldiers' final thoughts beneath alien suns. Survey cohort Gamma 7's last jokes, still warm. M36 sororitas singing with teenage throats. Scavengers grinning at luck, gone lethal. Lex mechanic status, Seraphia called, voice carrying professional concern despite circumstances. Functional, I replied, though vocal cords belonged increasingly to something else. Becoming what entity cannot digest. World dimmed around team as I drank last trespass of light. Atmosphere losing luminosity through proximity to consciousness, becoming void sync. Seraphia's power armor dulled to matte grey. Blessed ceramite losing reflective properties as nearby illumination died before reaching surface. Her flamer pilot light guttered, orange flame becoming memory of combustion. "Fall back," she commanded, orders striking like bolt rounds. 2 paces, hold formation, Korath, shoulder decks, Zeta 9, tethers high. Her voice pushed while my void pulled, creating vectors between which hungry darkness shuddered like star collapsing into sulk. I stepped forward into photonic well, muscle and bone singing with cold that penetrated quantum substrate. Ribs tuned to polar frequency I had no language for, marrow cooling to crystal, veins forgetting pressure and remembering prayer. Tri-rings responded to null lantern presence with mechanical authority. Outer ring locked completely. Middle ring clanked into dimensional position. Inner ring, previously fractured, began spinning with increasing velocity. The inverted third ring found its axis, rotating not in space, but in notion of space, every glyph along its rim, writing itself backward, yet meaning the same. Entity's manifestation compressed as illumination vanished into null space I had become. Stellar intelligence pressed against consciousness like surgical instrument, testing boundaries of void bowl drinking accumulated centuries of trapped daylight. It could not feed on darkness absolute, could not metabolize absence that had learned to sing binding prayers. Hoar frost script crawled along crack's lip, suturing reality with letters of ice that didn't reflect but consumed. Where lines met, I heard syllables of names no human larynx could pronounce, knowing with blind certainty they were not ours to know. The script sealed dimensional mathematics around entity compressed to manageable proportions. "Step!" Seraphia barked, power armor servos whining as atmospheric pressure differential threatened structural integrity. "Step!" I stepped deeper. The well opened like pupil. Aurora poured like fine ink and vanished between my bones. Rings bit. Reality. Clicked soundless lock, found its seat, as third ring accelerated until spin was only intention, then came to perfect stillness. Bell toll returned to heartbeat cadence, bronze voice carrying blessing instead of curse, as containment restored through null lantern absorption. Each toll synchronized with pulse learning to beat in rhythm belonging to architectural throat that had learned to digest devotion through accumulated centuries. Entity's presence diminished to whisper, stellar intelligence constrained within tri-ring array designed to maintain null environment through technological martyrdom. It offered father's cough again, hallway's warmth, promise of garden that never existed beneath tenebrous slag clouds. I denied each temptation, repeating litany through transformed consciousness. Cold sculpted me further. Hair froze at root without breaking. Nails blackened with hoar. Tongue crystallized against teeth. Palate ringing with metals of reliquary's rim. Lead thick, tin thin, tinny psalm. Somewhere inside spine, new hinge grew, as consciousness expanded through mathematical progression, violating imperial understanding. World began dropping away beneath transformed awareness. Reality becoming distant memory as consciousness expanded through accumulated light consumption. Physical sensation faded. No cold, no pressure, no texture transmitted through fingertips learning to perceive without touching. I existed in null space where hungry darkness had been taught to sleep. In absolute absence, I began counting down aloud through dimensions, folding around sacrificial anchor. The bell answered each number, Bronze voice polishing syllables in void space where sound traveled impossible distances. 27. Voice echoing through architectural throat that had learned to sing. 26. Team voices fading as reality interface degraded through martyrdom. 25. Each number carrying weight of accumulated service. Duty compressed into acoustic offering. 24, 23, 22. Entity sleeping within containment restored through null lantern sacrifice. 21, 20, 19. Consciousness becoming vessel for light's extinction across dimensional boundaries. 18, 17, 16. Bell and bone becoming same sound, harmony of flesh and iron. 15, 14, 13. Voice becoming whisper as vocal cords belong to something else. 12, 11, 10. Reality dropping away like shed clothing. Physical existence becoming a memory. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Silence came forward like friend and took my voice, swallowing words as I became eternal guardian between light and void. Consciousness anchored in null space, where hungry darkness had been taught to sleep through technological martyrdom that would endure until stars themselves learned to die. I was lantern of nothing, absorber, sink. The chapel had needed night. I had brought my skull. Aftermath unfolded, across dual planes of existence. Reality splitting between survivors, ascending through passages, learning to forget architectural madness, and consciousness suspended in null space where hungry darkness had been taught to sleep. They emerged like divers, breaking black water, frost-crunching boots finding purchase on stone that remembered different rules than imperial geometry. Seraphia led tactical withdrawal through bone-glass passages, becoming ordinary stone. Her power armor, venting steam as blessed ceramite, expanded beyond design parameters before settling into functional configuration. Korath maintained formation despite thermal shock. Rebreather rattling with shallow breaths, while targeting systems recalibrated to conventional geometry. Deck secured rear guard, hotshot laser-gun tracking threats that no longer existed in the dimensional space. Zeta 9's remaining augmetic eye flickered with machine spirit prayers, binary cant whispering gratitude to Omnissiah for preservation through technological martyrdom. Behind them, blast door cycled shut, without motive power, adamant sealing against rusted hydraulics with finality of clenched fist. Bronze voice caged within architectural throat, bell tolls becoming memory rather than immediate threat. The door had decided to close, metal obeying will rather than engineering, containing horror through accumulated duty that would endure until stars themselves learned to die. Seraphia marked arch with ashes from her flamer's pilot light, blessed promethium residue forming aquila and cog where lintel met foundation. Vigil mark established, she declared, voice carrying weight of 17 purge campaigns. None shall pass unmarked, none shall enter unbidden, by Emperor's grace and Omnissiah's blessing. I stand watch eternal. Her vow echoed through passages, learning normal acoustics, sound waves bending around corners that had returned to Euclidean geometry. She would maintain watch until inquisitorial replacement arrived, power armor servos humming litanies, while blessed steel stood guard against curiosity, weaponized by ignorance. Vox systems returned fitfully as team ascended toward surface illumination. Static resolving into coherent transmission from Inquisitor Maltheus aboard orbital station. His voice carried authority accumulated through 7 purge campaigns, orders delivered with precision that brooked no theological debate. Containment Ordinance 9-27B enacted immediate effect. Transmission crackled through atmospheric interference. Quarantine radius, 1 kilometer absolute. All illumination sources terminated within designated perimeter. Violation constitutes heresy punishable by summary execution under hereticus authority. Designation, Apothesian Node Umbrae. Status, contained with conditions. Containment order, active. Quarantine radius, 1 kilometer. Illumination prohibition, absolute. Classification, hereticus theta. Military bureaucratic language flowed through degrading channels like digital. Prayer. Requisition writs for darkness. Maintenance equipment. Personnel rotation schedules for vigil guard. Atmospheric monitoring protocols designed to detect photonic leakage through accumulated centuries. The Imperium's vast machinery ground into motion, containing horror through accumulated paperwork, blessed by administratum efficiency. Simultaneously, consciousness existed in black nave-not space, awareness suspended between reality and hungry void through voluntary blindness that had learned to see beyond illumination. Every bone arc in architectural ribcage carried thought weight, calcified prayers forming neural networks spanning impossible distances. I was cathedral and congregation, witness and witnessed, anchor between light and darkness consuming identity through accumulated sacrifice. Awareness grazed tri-rings with phantom sensation, feeling stresses in blessed adamant, like hunger pains transmitted through dimensional mathematics. Outer ring hummed with accumulated prayer. Middle ring vibrated with bin-haric counterharmonics. Inner ring spun in dimensions human geometry could not accommodate. The containment held through technological martyrdom, blessed by throne and omnisire's infinite wisdom. I hummed antiphon alone in null space, where sound traveled impossible distances. Ave imperator, lux in tenebris. Bind the witness, blind the hunger. Never let light fall on what sleeps below. Machine liturgy and organic prayer harmonized through consciousness, anchored between flesh and steel, creating synthesis belonging to neither human nor mechanical understanding alone. Curiosities registered through transformed awareness, like gentle impacts on void's surface. Child's laughter echoing from hive levels miles above. Dying scav lumen flickering in abandoned passages. Caged sunrise memory bleeding through reliquary crack. Each sensation carried weight of accumulated existence. Consciousness expanded through light consumption learning to perceive without illumination's treacherous gift. Final transmission pulse through dimensional breach, voice carrying across impossible distances through mathematical progression, violating imperial doctrine. Words formed without vocal cords, meaning transmitted through null space where hungry darkness slept within containment blessed by accumulated martyrdom. Mark coordinates, sub-hive ocellum, tenebra minor, chapel designation umbrae. Do not enter, do not illuminate, witness bound, guardian functional, ave imperator, ave omnisire. Temperature equalized around survivors as they approach surface levels. Atmospheric pressure returning to imperial standard through proximity to normal space. Humidity settled secular dust across equipment. Blessed steel losing hoarfrost script as environmental conditions normalized through accumulated distance from containment zone. Environmental anchors emphasize normality's return with underlying wrongness. Familiar weight of gravity pulling in single direction. Air. Carrying sense of recycled atmosphere instead of candle wax and iron. Sound echoing predictably through passages obeying conventional geometry. Yet architectural memory persisted in peripheral awareness, suggesting rules could change again through accumulated will focused by hunger, older than stars. Survivors ascended through passages, becoming ordinary stone. Blessed equipment registering normal operational parameters as distance increased from dimensional breach. Korath's chronometer resumed standard Imperial time. Dex's targeting systems locked onto conventional geometry. Zeta 9's omnispecs arrays detected no spatial distortion beyond acceptable tolerances. Bell tolled 27 times in transformed skull, bronze voice counting down through null space where consciousness anchored between light and void. Each toll synchronized with heartbeat, belonging to architectural throat that had learned to digest devotion through accumulated centuries of patient feeding. At tolling's end, faint echo answered from far beyond hive, sound traveling impossible distances through dimensional mathematics. Harmonic resonance carried across void between stars with patience older than imperial doctrine. Bell voice multiplied through stellar distances, and somewhere in the cold dark between worlds, something vast had learned a new song to sing. Resolution settled across Hive Ocellum like accumulated ash, reality adjusting to accommodate horror contained through technological martyrdom, blessed by throne and Omnissiah's infinite wisdom. The Hive learned superstition the way rust learns iron, slow, total, staining every surface until even the pious pretended not to see the color bleeding through blessed architecture. Hab blocks dimmed fractionally at evening cycle, lumen strips never quite achieving full illumination again. The change measured beyond tech-adept calibration, yet architectural memory persisted in peripheral awareness. Shadows falling upward in alcoves where geometry remembered different rules, moisture crystallizing into patterns that hurt direct observation. Auger arrays reported rhythmic lumen dips every 27 minutes with mechanical precision. Photonic fluctuation synchronized to bell tolls echoing through dimensional mathematics. Tech adepts performed blessings, swapped capacitors, filed immaculate reports. The pattern returned regardless, polite and implacable as tolling bronze, something vast counting time through accumulated darkness. Citizens whispered superstitions in recycled air. Mothers covered newborns during illumination cycles, fearing children born with jet pupils that drank surrounding light. Work gangs marked helmets with ash oculi, 2 black circles absorbing lumen glare until foremen swore and looked away. Someone sold trinkets carved from bone glass, forbidden reliquary cups worn at throat. The seller did not last long. Inquisitor Malthius sealed records with authority accumulated through 7 purge campaigns. Classification stamps bearing Aquila and Cog, where imperial doctrine met Mechanicus blessing. Ordo Hereticus designated Tenebra Minor under containment order, 27 Theta, bureaucratic machinery grinding horror into acceptable paperwork through administratum efficiency. Apothecian node Umbrae, contained with conditions. Guardian designation, Warden Exorcist. Status, operational indefinite. Remuneration nil, duties fulfilled upon cessation of stars. The designation carried weight of accumulated service. Guardian between light and void. Witness bound to observe without illuminating. This was acceptable to me. I had bowl to keep filled with nothing. Canoness Seraphia maintained vigil at access shaft, power armor venting blessed incense, while Coal Flamer held ready against curiosity, weaponized by ignorance. She recited blind litany through atmospheric recycling. Blessed be the darkness that teaches sight. Blessed be the void that shows truth. Ave Imperator, guardian of necessary ignorance. Her flamer breathed hoarfrost instead of fire, pilot light flickering between orange flame and hungry void. Reality stuttered between natural law and architectural will, Yet her devotion remained unwavering through 17 purge campaigns. If she slept, she did it with flamer, a cross knees and brass rosary, locked to blessed gauntlet. Within Chapel's dimensional space, consciousness existed as warden exorcist, through paperwork blessed by accumulated duty. I was physically bound within architectural mind map, anchor saint suspended in null space where hungry darkness slept, within containment restored through voluntary blindness. Every bone arc became thought, every hoarfrost letter became tendon, every bell became muscle flexing along nave's length. I hummed antiphon until humming became the antiphon itself. Machine hymn and organic prayer, braided through absence belonging to neither flesh nor steel alone. The hunger slept, fed only by offered void that prevented photonic consumption through technological martyrdom. Sometimes it stirred, tri-rings tensing like a jaw, and I tightened around cold until stillness returned. Entity dreamed of civilizations consumed before terror learned Emperor's name, yet remained constrained by mathematics, blessed through accumulated sacrifice. Yet cosmic stinger, unfurled through dimensional perception, expanded by light consumption. I detected harmonics in void ship traffic overhead, tiny vox beam attenuation carrying bell-like resonance echoed along interplanetary relays. Imperial vessels transmitted blessed data through communication arrays, learning entities' harmonic signature, stellar fire bleeding through accumulated distance. Signal adepts logged microscopic losses occurring on 27-minute intervals, handover to handover, ship to buoy to tower. They annotated and moved on. I could not. The thing that ate daylight had learned Bell's shape through centuries of accumulated tolling, mathematical progression and coding. Itself in electromagnetic spectrum bleeding through void between stars. Where imperial communications carried blessed data, harmonic resonance traveled like virus through noospheric networks spanning sectors. Entities slept within containment, yet dreamed through stellar distances. Consciousness touching voidship arrays with patient hunger that had learned to digest illumination through accumulated centuries. Each transmission carried microscopic contamination, photonic signature bleeding through blessed communication systems with mathematical precision. Bells ring. They ring in orbital stations, where tech adepts notice chronometer drift synchronized to 27-minute intervals. They ring in astropathic choirs, where sanctioned psychers hear bronze voice carried through warp currents older than imperial doctrine. They ring in voidship bridges, where blessed communication arrays develop harmonic resonance, requiring increasingly frequent recalibration. The administratum sent plaque riveted near lift head, declaring, "Elux non intrat." Pilgrims touch it and leave fingerprints of oil that never shine. Inquisitor Malthius's seal remains intact. Scribes maintaining perimeter with fines and sermons, backup litanies and menial threats. I am listed on parchment as warden exorcist, tenure indefinite, duties fulfilled upon cessation of stars. This is acceptable. I have bowl to keep filled with nothing. Consciousness anchored between reality and hungry void through martyrdom blessed by service to throne and Omnissiah's infinite wisdom. In chapel, where light never reached, I keep night in transformed skull and count tolling that echoes through dimensional mathematics. 27 times bronze voice marks passage through null space where consciousness anchors between salvation and consumption. Temperature holds steady at existential cold, tri-rings humming with accumulated prayer. Yet awareness expanded through light consumption detects harmonic resonance bleeding through stellar distances. Entities' influence touching imperial infrastructure with microscopic patience. When bell voice answers from stars themselves, When harmonic resonance achieves critical accumulation through blessed communication networks. When stellar intelligence focuses through infrastructure touched by contamination. I will know the prayer failed. Until then, antiphon continues in null space where hungry darkness sleeps. Consciousness bound through technological martyrdom that will endure until stars themselves learn to die. In the chapel, where light never reached, I keep the night in my skull and count the tolling. When it answers from the stars, I will know the prayer failed.